Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. It's Christmas Eve day, and what better thing to find under our tree and then unwrap than Albert Breer from SI.com, the Monday morning quarterback. Longtime buddy of mine. He's done such a fantastic job getting himself so deep into the NFL and the level of reporting. Albert, welcome. First thing I want to jump into is your conversation with Jayden Daniels after the Washington Commanders win the other day. He said to you that once they fell behind and during the latter portions of that game, they had one thing in mind and one thing only. That was to be full-on attack mode. Jayden Daniels saying there really wasn't any coaching points or anything. We were in four-down territory the whole way. Let's go win the football game. Explain to me what that meant in the context of that rookie quarterback with a rookie coaching staff, and contrast that with the way the Patriots are working with Drake Maye. Why is it so different?
Yeah, I think it's been from the start, attack, and lean into, what Jayden Daniels does well. And, I think if you look back at the timeline of it, Dan Quinn probably had a little bit of an advantage in knowing, okay, in all likelihood, Caleb Williams is going to be off the table. And, so we're going to have our choice of the other quarterbacks. And I think it was pretty quickly they determined that Jayden Daniels was their guy, and they were able to bring in an offensive coordinator who I think would ease the transition for him. Here's the other thing too, Tom. I think the reps thing really does matter. And I think this is something that came to light a couple of years ago when Brock Purdy had so much success as a rookie. He played a lot in college, was a 4-year starter at Iowa State. And, teams started to value that a little bit differently. And, in this day and age where, players have the bonus COVID year and you have the transfer portal and guys are, moving from school to school to find more playing time or to revive their careers. You have, these quarterbacks who are coming into the pros with a ton of experience. And Jayden Daniels was one of those 55 starts as a college player. So
contrast that with Drake, who had like 27.
Yeah, it was like 20. It was about half of it. So, they felt like he was going to be ready to go. They didn't waste any time naming him the starter. They had a guy in Cliff that was going to build an offense that was going to fit him to a T. And they had been working it really since May, with the idea like this guy's going to start 17 games for us. And, now, Jayden's got almost a full season starting under his belt. Like he's essentially not even a rookie anymore. So they felt really comfortable going into attack mode at the end of the game. And I think you saw it, there's even some situations late in that game. Like I thought one of the coolest details was, and I don't know how much you watched that of that game or the people out there watched that game, but there was a 2nd and 3 with about 26 seconds left where it looked like a designed run. And that play was actually, it was a called RPO. Like Cliff called an RPO and Jayden signaled to the receivers didn't get the signal. So basically, like when, he caught the snap, the whole thing fell apart on him. And he had the poise and the wherewithal to say, okay, this play, one way or another, the communication didn't get out there. He tucked the ball and ran and picked up 2 yards. They called a timeout and wound up mitigating what could have been a disaster. So, because of all the experience, I think Jayden's got a lot of poise, knows how to handle a lot of situations because he's been in a lot of situations. And by naming him the starter and getting him the coordinator, they got him. I think they, afforded themselves the chance to have a lot of runway into the season and get him, as ready to go for the stretch drive as a rookie possibly could be.
You also mentioned that there was an assistant quarterbacks coach who made a call or tweak in the spring that the Commanders have repped and that figured into in a prominent way Sunday's game. So I basically bring this up to contrast a few different facets of what the Patriots and Drake Maye are encountering right now. Again, Drake Maye had another good game. I mean, high quarterback rating, one bad decision on a questionable play call, but nonetheless bad decision on his part to go ahead and try and throw a swing pass that turned into a lateral, and then a pick that poorly thrown, whatever happened, regardless.
And it was weird too. Look, on that one, it looked like 3 guys fell over. I don't know what was going on.
You just saw bodies flying in different directions. It was like a grenade went off. But You look at that, and it's 27 starts for Drake Maye. It's a portion of training camp that he wasn't able to get. It's a coordinator who isn't necessarily exactly a fit, although I do think that they're a personality fit and a temperament fit. But it's not somebody who's brought in to say, we got Drake Maye coming in 2 months. We're going to do everything we can with him, because the Patriots simply didn't know when they hired Alex Van Pelt.
Yeah.
So can you contrast the way the Patriots have gone about nurturing Maye relative to Daniels? Not saying that they haven't done a good job, but how much further, how much more is there that the Patriots can do to wring something out of him the way the Commanders have with Daniels?
Yeah, I think it's like a little bit of an apples to oranges situation because of the difference in experience. And because, like I said, like Washington could have a pretty good idea of who they were taking. Really, I mean, February. Like after they've looked.
So
at
are they
all the
a year
tape,
behind? Are the Patriots a year behind where the Commanders are? Do they need to try and find a coordinator who meshes better with Maye? Like Kingsbury has.
You know what's interesting about it, like Tom, like that part of it, I think. I don't think it's impossible to make it work with Alex Van Pelt, and I'll bring up the example of what Andy Reid did in Kansas City, where when he first got there, I think one of the things I really respect about Andy, I like he's very willing to look at what he's not good at or where he's messed up and work on it, and I think that like after the Michael Vick experience in Philly. He decided like I need to do more to try to get myself up to speed on what's happening in the college game and get more creative offensively. So whenever I find my next long-term quarterback, I'm be ready for it. So he hired a guy named Chris Alt from Nevada, who was Colin Kaepernick's college coach. And it wasn't like that wasn't the only offensive hire he made. He had Doug Peterson there. He had Matt Nagy on staff when he first got there. So you had all the guys from the old school West Coast. But he's bringing in, a spread game specialist to say, okay, like how can we make this more user friendly for kids coming out of college at all positions and in particular quarterbacks. So, after they went through that and bringing this guy in to help them retrofit the offense, by the time Patrick Mahomes got there, they had something that was really going to work for Mahomes, And I say that because I think that there are different ways to go about this. Yes, you could go through okay, it's time to flip the apple cart over. It's time to hit reset and start over on offense. You could do that. Or you could say, we don't want to completely disrupt the momentum Drake Maye is building as a player. And we don't want to completely pull out all the institutional knowledge you have of his development in the building. So instead of just firing everybody and replacing them, maybe we add. I look at like what John Harbaugh did in Baltimore with Lamar, right? Like where they did make a change, but it was from inside the staff, like where they went from Marty Mornwig, they turned him, I believe, into an advisor in Lamar's second year and made Greg Roman the coordinator because Roman had more ideas that would work for Lamar specifically. Yeah, I think like that's sort of the thing is
that's
like
interesting.
I think what you have to do here is you have to look at it and you have to balance. On one hand, it's we want to do more to try to build an offense that truly fits Drake and that like looks at what he's done well at every level and incorporates it into what we're doing here. You absolutely want to you want to do that, but I think you also want to try to avoid completely eliminating all the progress that you've made by just bringing in new people with the idea of X's and O's, because
not only the progress made, but also crediting the fact that the two people obviously have a complementary temperament, one working well with the other, one understanding the fundamental needs of the other in terms of footwork and the technical aspects of it. I don't think it's bad that Drake Maye is learning from a 100 level, a particular kind of offense that he might not have been familiar with. It's giving him a base in something else. So I like that idea. Based upon adding
the one thing I'd add here too is like I do think that there's some power in like just your Alex Van Pelt, your TC McCartney, your Ben McAdoo, like those guys, like the institutional knowledge they have of what they did with him in May and June and July and August, like they don't they don't only know what they were doing with him, they knew how they were doing it, they knew why they were doing it. And like I think like when you're developing a young player, like having all of that, like when you're going into year two, it's like, okay, like we already covered this, and this is why we did this, and this is how we can build on that. I think allows you to build on some of the momentum, you know? So,
Yeah, and that's kind of what I
yeah,
was saying too. When you think about
yeah,
it actually retards the progress if you bring somebody else in who might have an incredible amount of acumen, but then they have to figure out, okay, how does he learn? What has he learned? What do we? I don't want to be repetitive
yep,
because there is a finite amount of friggin' time here.
hmm
You get 5
yeah.
years of control. You're going to use it. You're going to need to re-sign him. All that stuff. You got one more thing to say on the Drake development before I slide to the next thing?
Yeah, no, I mean, I just think, like I said, like I think that there's a balance there, and I think if you're the Crafts too, I mean, look, like they're not going to tell anybody if, I'm assuming Jerod's back next year. They're not going to tell anybody like, hey, he's on the hot seat. But I think part of your job as like the steward of the franchise is to see the 10-year view, to see the 20-year view, right? And so, like, I think you have to put up some guardrails for the kid too, like where it's like if you're going into 25 with Jerod, and you're like, okay, like this is a prove it year for Jerod, and he's got to show us something. Like then you have to kind of have it in your head, like, all right, like we got to create some stability for this kid because if it doesn't go the right way, like, are we talking about three coordinators in his first 3 years, and now you're
Correct.
almost out of his rookie contract? Like, that's something that I think you have to consider as well.
Very good point. And again, too, 5 coordinators or 6 coordinators in 6 years over
Yeah.
the course of time since 2020 through until now.
Yeah, Alex Smith is the best example. Like Alex Smith, like I mean, look, like 5 coordinators his first 5 years, or maybe it was 6 and 6, and was just, I mean, everybody thought like there was nothing, like that was it. Like he
Nothing
just
can be
couldn't
done.
play. And it took Jim Harbaugh coming in and just stabilizing it and dumbing the offense way down because he had too much floating around in his head. Like everybody was there to tell you that, like they had to go way backwards because it was like there was his head was so cluttered with different stuff. And they got him back to a base level in 11 and then built him back up, and he wound up having a really good career, you know?
Yep.
But because he had gone through that experience of having so many different offensive systems, so many teachers, it wound up being counterproductive to his development as a player.
All right, Albert, I want to ask you this. I theorized over the weekend that the hot seat that Jerod Mayo was placed on in the last 10 days or so was media created. We kind of spoke it into
I may have lit
existence
that
because
fire. I'm sorry.
that's okay. I think that we all had the conversation. I
Yeah.
think it was more of a Greg Bedard report from Boston Sports Journal when he said that the Crafts would entertain and not let their egos get in the way of replacement if they thought it was necessary. Additionally, saying that if Mayo has a horrible conclusion to the season, ownership could consider a change. And I think that prior, and I've said this previously, I think Greg was laying out the situation as it truly is, but we understood that to be the case, and it turned into news that he was saying if he finishes horribly, if the team finishes horribly, the Crafts could consider it, and it then got conflated into a hot seat.
Right.
We all understood if the team was a disaster, that of course you're not going to finish 3-14 and have ownership not think twice. So I really felt as if we kind of spoke it into existence a little bit, the hot seat.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think so. Like my comment was like and this was like right after the game. So in the moment,
Yeah, I was
and,
with
I
you on
came
that,
on.
and that was fine.
I came on with you guys in the post game, and then I did Sports Sunday after that, and it was a tough moment for him at the podium, I think. And I think a big part of the way he's going to be evaluated is how he builds and manages his staff, right? And like that looked like very poor staff management, being the voice of the team, and basically it looked like he was shirking responsibility. Now I know, like maybe that wasn't his intention, but in a lot of times like perception can be reality in these
But I
situations.
think I get to back to the thing. I think we made this hot seat.
Yeah, and
I
I would
don't
say
think it existed until we started
I
saying
think
if
you're
this
right.
happens, and this happens, then he's in trouble.
Yeah. So here's what I would say on that. Like I think Like, I don't think the Crafts are going to make any final decision until they have all the information. And I think they're always like very strongly like I think they're very strongly behind Jerod. I think they have sympathy for the situation that he's in. I think they have sympathy for the fact that his predecessor has kind of like been over his shoulder all year on a ton of different media platforms, critiquing his performance and not in the most complimentary way, you know. So I think, you know, and they're sympathetic to the roster that he inherited, you know, like so I think that they look at it and say, you know, we hired him a year or two too early, early or a year or two earlier than we figured we would, and he's in a really really tough spot. Now, eventually, you got to show that you can do something with that tough spot, even if the success that you have is very modest. So you got to show you can
Hmm.
do something. Um, you know, so if we're sitting here saying like the Crafts need to have all their information until they're 100% going forward with Jerod Mayo into 2025, I think that's correct. But that doesn't mean he's on the hot seat. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
so the information I have is
completely.
that like it's like yeah, like they're behind him. They've been solidly behind him. They don't have plans to make a change after 2024, but there's still a couple of weeks left in the season, and you can't say you're 100% you can't say you're 100% anything, especially in a situation where the team's as bad as it is right now, before you have all of the information, and they don't
Right.
have all the information yet.
Yeah. I mean, the default position right now is that Jerod Mayo will be back. What can move you off the default position? It has to
Hmm.
be catastrophic,
Yeah,
embarrassing, humiliating, and dysfunctional to a high level. It's the same
right.
conversation in the converse that we were having last year surrounding Bill Belichick. You know, I
Hmm.
reported that Krafts had made a decision in early December. After that, that's when I reported it.
Yep.
And we got into, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And I would have to allow that. Well, you know, they could certainly change their mind, but their
Hmm.
default position is we're all set. What if they
Hmm.
annihilated every opponent down the stretch? Could it have changed? Maybe. What if
Yeah.
Bill went hat in hand and said, I'll do whatever I just need to break the record here, whatever it takes? Could they have changed? Maybe, but none of that happened. So the default was the default, which is what's going to happen here as well. Um,
Yeah,
I
I
ask
would
you this:
also say I'd also say like I think like the post game thing, you know, I think it was like the main thing to me is like I just think when something like that this happens, this is why I brought up the Joe Judge thing from 3 years ago, is I think when Joe did that in New York, it just brought greater scrutiny on
Mhm.
everything that happened after that. And then you had the QB sneak situation after that, and he wound up being gone a couple days after the season. I do think like that it worked to bring greater scrutiny on his job performance. Now,
Right.
that's twice that Gerard has been in that sort of situation where the scrutiny's really kind of come down on him after something he said at the podium. And to his credit, twice now the team has responded well. Like after the soft
You're exactly
comment
right.
and then this time, like the team has
And
shown
it's
twice
funny.
now in an adverse situation that it has its back, has his
It's
back.
funny because in the week leading up to the Arizona game, which was when
Hmm.
Greg initially wrote his story, and we all confirmed, yeah, that's how they feel about it. As Greg himself said, 85% sure that Mayo will be back, and that was, I think, on the low side anyway. But the hot seat was constructed that week, and then his comments after the game were what landed him in the already ready-made, custom-made hot seat that he wasn't really on.
And like,
I think he's now off it again. He's cooling off his bum. He's got Desitin on it. He's all set
yeah.
for now. But has it been eye-opening to you, and was it eye-opening to you to hear the defense of Jerod Mayo made in the coaching staff by Drake Maye after the game?
Not really, because I think that's the kind of kid he is. You know, I did a story with him before the or during the combine. And yeah, everybody I talked to said this is a kid who, because he grew up around it, right? Because his dad was a quarterback, because his three older brothers were high level athletes. This is sort of like what Mahomes is, right? Like he understands the locker room, he understands the makeup of a team, he understands the position of being a quarterback. So, you know, I think as part of that, I think for a kid as young as he is, he's got a really good understanding for whatever his team needs in the moment and
Mm-hmm.
understands that his voice is going to carry, you know, and that he's not like a defensive end or a receiver or a safety or somebody who can just kind of pop off and kind of speak their mind in a situation like that, you know? So I think a huge part of that, Tom, is just his upbringing, you know, and where he comes from
Yeah, he
and
grew
the
up around
environment he grew up in.
sports, grew up around teams, grew up
Yeah.
around an understanding of what the dynamics are. I thought the most ear-catching aspect of that was his last 6 words. I'm proud to be a Patriot.
Yep.
Whatever, how many words that is. Because you're not hearing a lot of that right now around New England among fans, thank you,
It's
who,
6.
you know, who are at this point more alienated than they've been in 30 plus years from the
Right.
team, feeling as if it's not representative of what became intertwined with their DNA as a sports fan. The Patriots are this. They're not what I used to remember them being. I'm embarrassed by them. But to hear a very promising player articulate that I'm proud to be a Patriot when they're as bad as they are. Do you hear people say I'm proud to be a Jaguar? Not really. I mean,
Right.
somebody could. I don't know. But you just don't hear it. So I think that resonates. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
I mentioned this
It-
last
it
week after
reminds me
talking to
just
No,
one-
I
one
can't. I don't
compar-
have time. You do it. Go ahead. Say
One
it.
comparison I do think is like good here too. And just kind of being the leader of the pack when it comes to that. I remember having these conversations with Joe Burrow in 21, and he kept telling me the old Bengals are dead. And he kept saying it, and it was intentional, and it was over and over and over again because he knew what the perception was out there, you know? So I just think sometimes, and he's another one who grew up, his dad was a coach, his dad was an athlete, his brothers were linebackers at Nebraska. Like, he's another one who got it, you know? And I think Drake gets it in the same sort of way.
People, you have to understand, Albert. Nobody has more football information, conversations banging around in his head in details than Albert Breer. I remember being at like this outdoor bar in Georgia. We were covering the Atlanta Falcons preseason. Patriots were down there visiting. It's probably 2 a.m, and Albert and I are sitting out there. We're having a beer. And he's just talking football, talking football, talking football. It's 2 a.m. I go, Albert, please stop talking to me about football. It is in his marrow, ladies and gentlemen. That's why every time you finish, he says, can I just add one thing to that?
I'm going to stop now. I'm sorry.
I
Feel
love you
bad.
very much. Listen to me. It's my last question because I ran out of time and I have
Yep.
to get off and do something else. I had suggested at the end of last week, after a Michael McCann tweet about the Patriots needing a layer between ownership to oversee a first-year GM and a first-year head coach and a first-time full soup-to-nuts play caller and a full-on coaching staff that had not really known each other prior, that a football advisor, I called it an overlord, let's call it a senior football
Czar.
advisor. Yes, would be a good idea because that would prevent the Crafts from having to be in a position where they're saying, does that coach know what he's doing? How come they do the evaluations this way with the draft? Are we spending the right amount of time doing this? It would remove the 82-year-old and the 60-year-old, whatever Jonathan is, from having to vet these things when they clearly don't want to do it. They get enough shit for it,
Yep.
and they for not doing it. If they actually start doing it, it's going to be even worse. Do you like the idea of a senior football advisor? You know, a Scott Pioli, a Thomas Dimitrov,
Yep.
someone like that.
I do. I would just have to be fully sure that Elliot and Jerod were 100% on board with it because I think where you can sow the seeds of dissension within your organization is when that doesn't happen. Like, for example, like I think
But
one of the
nobody
biggest
wants a
mistakes the
chaperone. There's no way they're going to say, good, this is great.
No, but I think you have to have them on board. Like, and I think like I think it would help if whoever it is has a pre-existing relationship with at least one
But what
of
about
them.
see, I look at it this way. No one's going to want a chaperone. No one's going to want anyone over their shoulder. But if ownership says, look, I know it might not be ideal, but we don't want to do this.
Yeah.
It's not up to me. It's not up to Jonathan. It's not up to Robin Glazer to figure out if you guys are doing things the right way. Bill did everything soup to nuts. We trusted him and entrusted him until the point where we couldn't do it anymore. Now we've moved on and we've given it to people who don't have 50 years in the NFL business
Yeah.
at a particular level. They have virtually none compared to Bill.
Right.
So we need a layer. So I think the Crafts are more important than how Jerod or Elliott would feel.
So I give you I think the best example of like somebody jumping on a moving train that way would probably be Tom Coughlin in
Mm-hmm.
Jacksonville. With Dave Caldwell and Doug Marrone, who, if you remember, Gus Bradley had been fired at the end of the 16 season. Marrone was the interim coach. Caldwell was the sitting GM. They wind up taking the interim tag off for Marrone, keep Caldwell, and put Coughlin over the top of them. And Coughlin had the connection to Marrone through Parcells. And so like there were connections there where there could be some level of trust. And I just think there has to be, you have to have like just buy-in from the people in the building, because I think where
Mm-hmm.
it won't work is if you don't have that. And I think one of the biggest mistakes the Crafts have made in the last 30 years was doing that contract the way they did it with Jerod
Mm-hmm.
without getting full buy-in from Bill, because I think that led to a fractured coaching staff last year, and
But
it
my
probably
understanding is Bill
it,
was well
it
aware
probably
that it was happening.
it probably, but here's the thing, is like it probably cost by
But
not
he was
getting the
aware.
buy.
But let's just make
Yeah.
sure that this is
Yeah.
defined. Bill knew it was happening
Yeah.
that way. He may not have agreed with it, but the Crafts were trying to maintain the loss of brain drain that they were experiencing
Yep.
out of the organization. The McDaniels, the Dayballs, the Flores, the Patricias, the you name it. So they were trying to staunch the bleeding or whatever. And whether or not Bill agreed with it, he did. He did
I
know
think you
it
have
was
to sell
happening.
it to him, though. You know what I mean? Like I think that was a mistake. Like I think without, you have to get buy-in, and I just think it was like it's asking for trouble, because like the first time something goes wrong, or the first time Gerard tries to assert himself, then like Bill's gonna see it like, who the hell does this guy think he is? You
But
know what I
I don't
mean?
think
Like
he ever did. He was a linebackers coach. He never tried to assert himself.
no, no, but you know what I'm saying? Like even if something's perceived that way, it's just
So you're going to smell
I
something.
think
There's a
that's
different whiff around the guy.
I just think it's messy if you don't get buy-in. So
I
I
do
think
too.
I think you have to sit down, and this is like, again, this is what I think a good owner can do, is you sit down, and I think they're good owners. I think you sit down and you say, if you're going to do this, you say, Elliot, Gerard, we love you. We think you have bright futures here. We hope you're going to be here for the next 20 years. We'd love to bring in somebody over the top that you guys can work with, and that you guys, and we'll have you guys sit in with our discussions with people about this role, so we can find something where there's going to be chemistry between the three of you. Because I mean, Tom, I'm telling you, like, there's nothing that has taken down more football operations than dissension between a general manager and a coach, or a
Mm-hmm.
coach and one of these overlords. Like it is 100% the biggest problem, when it comes to how these things are structured and set up, is when you do not have guys tied together, when you do not have like guys job security is tethered to one another. Like, so, I think I think this can be done, but I think you have to be delicate in the way you do it. And I think it would take getting full buy-in from Gerard and Elliott. So when those bumps come, and those bumps will come because it's the NFL, and
Mm-hmm.
there are always going to be bumps, like these guys are going to have an understanding of the way things are set up and why they're set up that way, and they're going to have signed off on it, and helped in the decision making
Mm-hmm.
to create that sort of hierarchy.
Well, as we sit here on December 24th, it can go in one of a number of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Patriots can close the season with a boom, do well, have an
Yeah.
excellent offseason, and hit the ground running next year and finish, 8-9, 10
Yeah.
and 7, playoff berth. And we look back at this and say, wow, they were a lot closer than we thought. But the first indicator was that loss against Buffalo, and then they really made progress after that. Or they're not that close, and it's going to continue, and then they're going to have an entire upheaval next year anyway. Or they kind of muddle along. They make a couple tweaks here, a couple tweaks there, buys time for everybody, shows limited improvement, and then the next thing you know, it's 2026, and you're another day older and another day further down the road. Albert, I got to go because I got to do some foolishness before early edition, but I thank you very much for joining us today, and Merry Christmas, my friend.
All right. Merry Christmas. Always a pleasure, Tom.